William Hartman lay motionless in the lavish hospital room, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he had led as a wealthy businessman. The walls, adorned with tasteful art pieces and rich mahogany paneling, seemed to close in on the somber gathering. The beeping of the heart monitor punctuated the heavy silence, each beep a reminder of the fragility of life. Family members and business associates filled the room, their expressions a mixture of worry and helplessness. Claire, William's wife, stood at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, the strain of the situation evident in her furrowed brow. "We need to discuss the future of Hartman Enterprises," Greg, William's business partner, said, his voice low and tinged with urgency. He leaned against the wall, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "If he doesn't wake up soon—" "Don't say that," Claire snapped, her eyes narrowing at Greg. "William will wake up. He's a fighter." Her voice wavered, betraying her uncertainty. "We can't just assume the worst." "I'm not assuming anything," Greg replied, a hint of irritation creeping into his tone. "But we have to be prepared. If he doesn't pull through, the board will want answers. They'll want to know who will take the reins." Claire shot him a glare, but her heart raced at the thought. She turned her attention back to William, her hand gently brushing against his. "Please, honey, come back to us," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this without you." The tension in the room thickened as other family members exchanged worried glances. William's brother, Mark, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the weight of unspoken words pressing on him. "What if he doesn't wake up?" he finally asked, his voice cracking. "What if—" "Stop! We're not going there," Claire interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "We're here to support him, not to speculate on what might happen." Just then the door swung open and a nurse entered, her demeanor professional yet warm. "Excuse me, everyone," she announced, glancing around the room. "I have a visitor who's requested to see Mr. Hartman." The room fell silent, and Claire's brow furrowed in confusion. "A visitor? We weren't informed of any scheduled visitors." The nurse smiled politely, but there was a hint of mischief in her eyes. "I understand, but," she insisted, "it's someone important to him." Before anyone could protest, she motioned for the visitor to enter. Margaret stepped into the room, her presence commanding attention. She was striking, with long dark hair cascading over her shoulders and an air of mystery surrounding her. The moment she entered, the atmosphere shifted. An inexplicable energy filled the space. Claire felt a shiver run down her spine, while Greg's expression darkened, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Who are you?" Claire demanded, her protective instincts flaring. "What do you want with my husband?" Margaret approached William's bedside, her gaze fixed on him, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from the family. "I'm here to see him," she said softly, her voice smooth and calming, yet laced with an undercurrent of intensity. "Do you know him?" Mark questioned, curiosity piquing despite the situation. "Why haven't we heard about you before?" "I know him better than you realize," Margaret replied, turning slightly to face Mark, her eyes piercing. "But right now he needs me. He needs to hear my voice." Claire felt a surge of anger. "This is ridiculous. You can't just waltz in here claiming to know my husband. He's unconscious." "Please, Claire," Greg interjected, holding up a hand to calm her. "Let her speak. If she knows something about William, we should hear her out." Margaret turned back to William, a soft smile gracing her lips. "I've missed you, William," she whispered, leaning closer. "I know you can hear me. Please, come back to me." As she spoke, something unusual happened. William's face, pale and still, seemed to flicker with a hint of recognition. His eyelids fluttered ever so slightly, and an almost imperceptible frown formed on his brow. Claire's heart raced as she leaned forward, desperate for any sign of life from her husband. "William?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" Margaret continued, her tone soothing, yet laced with urgency. "You promised me, remember? You said you would always come back. I'm here to remind you of that promise." The tension in the room grew, a palpable energy swirling around them as Margaret's words hung in the air. Claire exchanged a bewildered glance with Greg, who looked just as perplexed. What did she mean by a promise? Who was this woman to William? "Margaret, you need to leave," Claire finally said, her voice steadier now but still filled with an edge of warning. "This isn't the time for games. We need to focus on William's recovery." Margaret turned to Claire, her expression softening. "I understand your concern, but I assure you, I'm here for him. He has something he needs to remember, something important that could change everything for him, for you." "What are you talking about?" Greg pressed, stepping closer, his instinct to protect William kicking in. "What kind of change are we talking about?" Margaret held his gaze, unflinching. "The kind of change that comes from truths long buried, secrets that, if revealed, could shatter the very foundation of his empire." Before Claire could respond, Margaret returned her attention to William, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You need to wake up, William. We have unfinished business." As the words left her lips, a flicker of movement crossed William's face. The heart monitor beeped faster, a rhythmic tempo that seemed to echo the rising tension in the room. Claire felt a chill run down her spine, a mix of dread and anticipation. Who was this woman? And what did she know about her husband that could threaten everything they had built together? Margaret's presence was both calming and unsettling, and Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the woman had come to unleash a storm. As Margaret leaned in closer, the room held its breath, waiting, wondering and fearing what might come next. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air of the hospital room, mingling with the tension that crackled among the gathered family members. After Margaret's unexpected visit, Claire Hartman sat at her husband's bedside, her mind racing with questions. She could still feel the chill of the woman's presence lingering in the air. Margaret had left abruptly, her enigmatic aura still casting a shadow over the room. Who was that woman? Claire finally broke the silence, her voice sharp as she turned to face the small group of family and business associates who had been waiting on the edge of their seats. The dim lights of the room flickered slightly, as if in response to the rising tension. Why was she here? William's brother, David, straightened up in his chair, concern etched on his face. "I don't know, Claire. She seemed familiar with him, but none of us have ever seen her before." Claire's heart raced. "Familiar? This is a hospital, David. My husband is lying here in a coma, and a stranger walks in whispering to him like they share some deep secret? I don't like it." Greg, William's business partner, ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his posture. "We need to find out who she is. She could be anyone, someone looking to take advantage of the situation. We can't allow anyone to disrupt his recovery." "Disrupt or expose?" Claire snapped back, her eyes narrowing. The emotional turmoil within her was becoming harder to contain. What if she knows something about William that we don't? "Let's not jump to conclusions," David interjected, trying to mediate the growing conflict. "Maybe she's just a friend from the past. William has known many people in his life." "Do you really think he would keep a friend like that from us?" Claire shot back. "He wouldn't have hidden someone significant from his family. This feels different." Just then the door creaked open and a nurse entered, disrupting the charged atmosphere. "Excuse me, but I need to check on Mr. Hartman's vitals," she said, her voice calm and professional. The family members reluctantly stepped aside, allowing her to approach the bed. As the nurse worked, Claire's mind continued to race. The image of Margaret's face, her striking features and piercing gaze, haunted her. Why did she feel an inexplicable connection to William's past? What secrets lay hidden beneath the surface? The following day, Margaret returned, her expression unreadable as she stepped into the room. The family was present once again, their eyes fixated on her as if she were an intruder. Claire felt her heart quicken, a mix of anger and apprehension swirling within her. "Margaret," Claire said, her voice steady despite her growing ire. "You're back. Why are you here again?" Margaret's gaze flickered to William before meeting Claire's. "I need to talk to him," she said, her tone resolute. "It's important." "Important?" Claire echoed, crossing her arms defensively. "What could possibly be so important that you would come back here? You don't belong in this room." "Perhaps not in the way you think," Margaret replied, her voice softening slightly. "But I have known William for years. We have a history that you may not understand." "History?" David scoffed. "You mean to say you were friends? Lovers? What kind of history could justify your presence here?" Margaret's eyes darkened momentarily, but then softened. I was part of his life before you, long before he built this empire. He meant something to me and I to him. I owe it to him to be here now." Claire felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "You owe it to him? What about the family he built, the life he chose? You have no right to come here and claim some connection that we didn't know existed." "Sometimes the truth is more complicated than it seems," Margaret replied, her voice steady. "William needs to know the truth about his past. He deserves to wake up with all the pieces of his life." "What truth?" Claire demanded, feeling her anger boil over. "What are you hiding?" Margaret hesitated, and for a moment the air was thick with anticipation. "There's something I need to share with him, something that could change everything." "Then say it," Claire urged, her voice rising. "What could possibly be so important that you would risk everything?" Margaret took a deep breath, her gaze steady upon Claire. "William and I shared a moment, a promise, if you will. It was a time of vulnerability, of dreams and aspirations that were never fulfilled. I loved him and he loved me, but life took us in different directions." "I don't care about your love story," Claire shot back. "What I care about is the man lying in that bed and the life he built with me. If there's something you need to tell him, then do it now. But know this, I won't let you destroy what we have." Margaret remained silent for a moment, weighing her words. Finally she spoke, her voice low and deliberate. "William deserves to know that he has someone out there who has been waiting for him, someone who is a part of his past that he never acknowledged." Claire's heart sank at the implication. "What do you mean? Who? What are you talking about?" Margaret's expression hardened, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "I can't tell you everything right now, but I promise you, when the time comes, you will understand why this is necessary." The tension in the room was palpable. Claire felt a knot form in her stomach, the weight of Margaret's words pressing down on her. "You think you can just waltz back into his life and stir up all these emotions? You don't know us. You don't know what we've built." "I know that love doesn't always follow the path we think it should," Margaret replied, her voice steady. "And sometimes the past has a way of re-emerging when we least expect it." As Margaret turned her attention to William, Claire felt a surge of frustration. "You think this is about love? This is about loyalty, family, and the life we fought for. Don't you dare come in here and act like you have some claim over him." Margaret leaned closer to William, her voice a mere whisper. "William, if you can hear me, please, know that I am here for you. I've always been here." She paused, glancing back at Claire. "And I will not leave until you understand the truth." Claire's heart raced, her mind spinning with uncertainty. She felt as if the very foundations of her marriage were crumbling beneath her. How much did she really know about William? Who was this woman who claimed to have shared so much with him? Margaret's presence was a storm that had swept into their lives, and Claire found herself caught in its whirlwind. The truth, whatever it was, loomed on the horizon like a dark cloud, threatening to pour down the rain of revelations that could wash away everything she held dear. In the dimly lit corridor of the hospital, the air was thick with uncertainty and tension. William Hartman's family and associates had gathered outside his room, whispering among themselves, their expressions a mix of worry and frustration. Greg, William's business partner, paced back and forth, the lines on his forehead deepening with each step he took. "Who is this woman, Margaret?" he muttered under his breath, glancing at the closed door as if it held the answers he sought. The strange calm that enveloped the room during her visit felt unnerving to him. It was as though she had cast a spell, momentarily distracting them from the reality of their situation. "She's just a visitor," Claire, William's wife, replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The hurt in her eyes was unmistakable. She had not yet come to terms with Margaret's presence, nor the unsettling stories that accompanied her. Greg stopped, turning to Claire with a frown. "Just a visitor. You heard what she said. She claims to know him, has known him for years. That's not just coincidence." Claire shook her head, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I don't understand why she would come now, of all times. Why now, when he needs us most?" "That's what I intend to find out," Greg said, determination flashing in his eyes. "I have some contacts I can reach out to. I'll dig into her background, see what I can uncover." Claire opened her mouth to protest, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. Just be careful, Greg, if she really does know him, if there's something between them. She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The idea of William having a past she was unaware of felt like a dagger to her heart. Greg nodded, his expression softening. I'll be discreet. We can't let anyone know about this. Not yet. While Greg embarked on his investigation, Claire found herself alone in their shared suite, the silence amplifying her anxiety. The walls felt like they were closing in as memories of happier times with William washed over her. She could see him laughing, carefree before the weight of the world and the demands of his empire settled on his shoulders. In a desperate attempt to distract herself, Claire began to go through some of William's belongings in search of anything that could provide insight into his state of mind before the accident. As she rummaged through a drawer, her fingers brushed against something smooth and cold. Pulling it out, she discovered an old photograph, its edges worn and faded. The image captured a moment in time. William, younger and full of life, was standing next to a woman who was undeniably Margaret. They looked so happy, so in love. Claire's breath caught in her throat, a mixture of disbelief and betrayal coursing through her veins. The photograph felt like an anchor, pulling her down into the depths of confusion. She stared at it, her heart racing as the soft glow of the hospital room felt suddenly harsh and unwelcoming. As she held the photograph in her trembling hands, Claire felt a rush of emotions. How long had William kept this from her? Did he love her? Did he love Margaret? The questions spiraled in her mind, each one sharper than the last. Her fingers traced the outlines of their faces, and for a moment, the world around her faded away. Just then, a gentle knock on the door broke her reverie. It was Margaret, her presence commanding yet strangely soothing. Claire felt a surge of anger and confusion, but she quickly masked it with an air of calm. Margaret stepped inside, her gaze instantly falling on the photograph Claire held. "Ah, I see you found it." Her voice was steady, but there was a flicker of something, regret perhaps, behind her eyes. "What is this?" Claire demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and hurt. "Why do you have a picture of my husband with you? Who are you really? And what is your connection to him?" Margaret took a deep breath, her expression softening. "Claire, I never intended for you to find out this way. William and we share a history that predates your marriage. I thought it was behind us, but I suppose it never truly left." Claire's heart raced as she fought to contain her emotions. "A history? Is that what you call it? You come here while he's lying in a coma and you expect me to just accept it?" Margaret stepped closer, her eyes earnest. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I came because I needed to see him, to make sure he knew he wasn't alone. There are things I need to tell him, and by extension, you." "Things?" Claire scoffed, anger bubbling to the surface. "What could you possibly say that would make this any better? You've already disrupted our lives enough." Margaret's voice grew firm. "William made a promise to me once, Claire, a promise that could affect everything you know about his past and his present. You have to understand that what I'm about to reveal could change your perception of him entirely." Claire felt her breath hitch in her throat. "What are you talking about?" Margaret hesitated, the weight of her words heavy in the air. "William and I were once very close. Before the empire he built, we shared a bond. There was a time when he thought he could have a different life, one that didn't revolve around power and wealth." "Are you saying he loved you?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret nodded slowly, the sincerity in her eyes cutting through Claire's anger. "He did, but he chose a different path. I respected that, and I moved on. But I never forgot him, and he never forgot me." Claire felt her resolve waver, the cracks in her heart widening as she considered the implications of Margaret's words. "And now you're here, what? To disrupt everything we've built together?" "I'm here to protect him," Margaret replied, her voice unwavering. "There's something you need to know about that promise he made. It's something that could jeopardize everything you and he have built together. I didn't want to burden you with this, but you deserve to know the truth." Claire's mind raced. What truth? What could possibly be so significant? Margaret took a step back, her gaze unwavering. "William has a past he's buried deep. and it involves me in ways you can't imagine. It's about a promise, and the consequences of that promise could change the course of his legacy." Claire felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "You can't just drop a bomb like that and expect me to accept it. If he's in a coma, how can he explain this to me?" Margaret's eyes softened. "That's why I'm here. I want to help you understand. But you have to trust me, Claire. There's more at stake here than just our past." In that moment, Claire felt a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She was angry, confused, but deep down there was a sliver of curiosity, an urge to uncover the truth hidden beneath the layers of her husband's life. As she looked into Margaret's eyes, she realized that the woman standing before her held the key to unlocking secrets that had the potential to change everything she thought she knew. "Fine," Claire said, her voice steadying. "Tell me everything. I want to know the truth, even if it shatters my world." Claire stood at the edge of the hospital room, her heart racing with a mixture of anger and fear. The weight of Margaret's revelations hung heavily in the air, pressing down on her chest like a thick fog. She watched as Margaret sat beside William's still form, her fingers lightly brushing against his hand, a gesture that felt both intimate and intrusive. Greg, her husband's business partner, hovered close by, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "I can't believe this is happening," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "How could he keep something like this from me?" Greg turned to her, his expression serious. "We need to confront her. If William has a child out there, we have to know everything. It's not just about him anymore. It's about the legacy he's built." Claire nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "You're right. We can't let her manipulate us. If she thinks she can just waltz in here and disrupt our lives, she's got another thing coming." They exchanged a glance of understanding, a shared resolve to protect their family and William's legacy. Together, they approached Margaret, who seemed to sense their presence and turned to face them, a calm smile on her lips, as if she were welcoming an old friend. "Margaret," Claire began, her voice steady but laced with an edge, "we need to talk. You've dropped a bombshell on us, and we deserve to know the truth about your relationship with William." Margaret's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of concern. "I understand how difficult this must be for you, Claire, but what I have to say is important. William deserves to know about his child." "His child?" Greg interjected, unable to contain his incredulity. "You're talking about a child he never acknowledged. How do we know you're even telling the truth?" Margaret took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I have proof. Documents, photos, everything you need to understand that this isn't just some wild claim. William and we had a life together before he became the man you married. It was a life filled with love and dreams, and then it was all taken away." Claire felt a surge of emotions coursing through her, anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss for the life she thought she had. "You think you can just come here and pull on our heartstrings? You think we'll just accept you and your claims without question?" "I don't want to come between you and William," Margaret said softly, her voice trembling. "But this child deserves to know his father. William deserves to know his child." "Stop pretending like you care about William's happiness," Claire snapped, her patience thinning. "You're only here for yourself, to reclaim what you lost." Margaret's gaze turned steely, her resolve hardening. "You don't know me, Claire. You don't know what I've been through. I didn't come here for revenge or to tear your family apart. I came here because I believe William deserves a chance to make things right." "Make things right?" Claire echoed, incredulous. "What about the life we built together? What about our children? You want to just throw all of that away for your own selfish desires?" "I never wanted this to happen," Margaret replied, her voice breaking. "But I can't stand by while he lies here, unaware of the life he could have had. The love we shared was real, Claire. You can't deny that." Greg stepped forward, trying to mediate the escalating tension. "Let's all take a breath. This isn't getting us anywhere. Margaret, if you really have proof, then show us. But understand that this isn't just about you and William anymore. It's about Claire and their family." Margaret nodded slowly, her expression softening as she realized the weight of the situation. "I understand. I'll show you everything. But please try to see it from my perspective. I didn't choose this life for myself. I didn't choose to be separated from my child." Claire felt a pang of sympathy for the woman before her, but it quickly evaporated as she remembered the life she had built with William. "You're asking us to accept someone who could change everything we know. How can we trust you?" Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Greg. "This contains everything. Photos, letters. It's all there. I just want you to understand that this isn't just a secret. It's a life that was taken away from both of us." Greg took the envelope, exchanging a glance with Claire before opening it. As he pulled out the contents, his eyes widened. "These are letters, addressed to William?" He began to read, his face shifting from skepticism to shock. Claire leaned closer, her heart racing as she caught snippets of the letters. They were filled with love, longing, and a promise of a future that never came to be. This is real," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He was my first love, Claire, and when I found out I was pregnant, I thought he would want to be a part of our child's life. But then, everything changed, and I lost him, and the chance for our family." Claire's heart twisted painfully as she considered the weight of Margaret's words. "So you just waited all this time? You never tried to reach out before?" "I did," Margaret replied, her voice trembling. "But I was scared. I thought he had moved on, that he found happiness with you. I didn't want to disrupt your lives, but now I realize that keeping this secret was a mistake." Claire stepped back, processing everything that had been revealed. "And what do you expect us to do with this information? Just let you back into his life? Into our lives?" "I expect you to consider what is best for William and the child," Margaret said, her voice steady. "He deserves the chance to know his son, and so does the boy. You may think this is just about the past, but it's about the future too." As Greg continued to sift through the letters, Claire felt her world shifting beneath her feet. The foundation of her marriage, her life, everything she had believed to be true, was now in question. What if he doesn't want to know? What if he wakes up and doesn't remember any of this? Margaret's expression softened, and for a moment, Claire saw the vulnerability hidden behind her strong facade. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But if he does remember, if he does want to know, don't you think he deserves that chance?" Claire felt a lump form in her throat as she considered Margaret's words. The thought of her husband waking up and having to confront this truth was terrifying. Yet deep down she knew that this was a conversation they couldn't avoid. "Let's discuss this further," Greg said, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. "We need to think about the implications, not just for William but for everyone involved." Claire nodded, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. "I need time to process this. I can't just accept everything you've said, Margaret, but I won't ignore it either." Margaret wiped her tears, her expression resolute. "I understand, Claire. Just know that I'm not your enemy. I want what's best for William, for all of us." As the tension in the room shifted, Claire felt the weight of uncertainty settle around them. She glanced at William, still lying motionless, and wondered what the future held. Would he remember? Would he want to know about the child? And most importantly, how would this revelation affect their family? The answers lay just beyond reach, hidden in the shadows of a past that was now threatening to resurface and redefine their lives. The sterile hospital room, filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of machines, held an unusual charge of anticipation. William Hartman, surrounded by a small army of concerned family and associates, lay in a state of vulnerability that was foreign to the titan of industry he once was. His wife, Claire, paced nervously beside him, her heels clicking against the polished floor, while Greg and a few other executives whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing at William's still figure. The tension was palpable, a mix of hope and dread hanging in the air. Suddenly, the monitors that tracked William's vital signs began to flicker erratically, drawing everyone's attention. Claire's heart raced as she moved closer, her eyes darting between the machines and her husband's face. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, filled with fear. The door creaked open and a nurse stepped in, her expression a mixture of professionalism and urgency. "Everyone, please step back. We might be witnessing a response," she said, moving to adjust the IV drips connected to William. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she watched. "William, can you hear me?" she implored, her voice trembling. "Please just wake up." In that moment, a faint movement flickered across William's eyelids. The room fell silent, save for the soft beeping of the machines. Claire leaned in closer, her heart pounding against her chest as she grasped William's hand tightly. "Please, please," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Then, slowly, like a flower unfurling beneath the sun, William's eyes fluttered open. The bright overhead lights momentarily blinded him, and his gaze was unfocused as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The first voice he heard was Claire's, filled with a mixture of relief and anxiety. "William, you're awake!" Claire exclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. His brow furrowed and he turned his head slightly, searching for clarity. "Claire?" he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What? What happened?" Before Claire could respond, Margaret stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. William's eyes, now slightly clearer, locked onto hers. "Margaret?" he breathed, confusion evident on his face. Claire's heart sank as she witnessed the spark of recognition igniting in William's gaze. She felt a cold wave of jealousy wash over her, but she held her ground, allowing the moment to unfold. "William, you've been in an accident. We didn't know if you would wake up," she explained, her voice wavering. "Margaret," he repeated, his voice gaining strength. "Why are you here?" Margaret took a step closer, her expression a mixture of longing and concern. "I came to see you, William. I needed to be here when you woke up." Her tone was gentle, yet it carried an undercurrent of urgency that made Claire's stomach knot. "Why?" William asked, his brow furrowing deeper as he tried to piece together the fragmented memories swirling in his mind. "How do you know me?" "Because I've always known you," she replied softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We shared something that changed us both." The room filled with an uneasy silence, the implications of her words hanging heavily in the air. Claire's heart raced as she processed the weight of Margaret's statement. "What do you mean, shared something?" she interjected, her voice firmer than she felt. "What is she talking about, William?" William turned to Claire, his features softening as he struggled to find the right words. I don't remember everything. But Margaret," he hesitated, "she was important to me once." Claire felt a fissure crack open within her. "Once? What does that even mean?" She felt the eyes of Greg and the others on her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "Claire, please," William said, his voice strained. "I need to understand, I need to remember." Margaret stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "William, you were my everything. I thought I lost you forever." She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his, igniting a spark of recognition that made Claire's heart sink further. "What do you mean?" Claire demanded, her voice rising. "You thought you lost him. You don't even know what kind of life he built after you. You don't know anything about him now." William winced at the tension in the air, feeling the weight of both women's emotions pressing down on him. "I need to remember," he repeated almost to himself, as if the words were a lifeline. "I can help you," Margaret said, her voice soothing. "But it's going to take time. There are things you need to know about us, about what happened." "Us?" Claire snapped, her voice sharp as she glared at Margaret. "You mean the past you both shared? What about the present? What about our life, William?" William looked between them, confusion and pain etched on his face. "I don't understand." Margaret took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with emotion. "You have a son, William," she said, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of the revelation. "A son who deserves to know you." Claire felt the world tilt beneath her feet as the words hung in the air like a pendulum swinging between them. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "A son?" William's expression shifted, a mixture of shock and horror crossing his features. "A son? What are you talking about?" Margaret's gaze softened as she spoke, revealing the hidden depths of their past. "We were in love before everything changed. I never told you because I wanted to protect you from the fallout. But he deserves to know his father, William. You deserve to know him. Claire felt a rush of emotions flood her senses: betrayal, anger, and a deep-seated fear that threatened to consume her. "How could you keep this from me?" she accused, looking at William. "How could you build a life with me knowing there was someone else out there?" "I didn't know," William protested, his voice rising in desperation. "I didn't remember. I thought I had left it all behind." The room was thick with tension, each word a dagger lodged deep into the heart of their relationships. Margaret's eyes were filled with unshed tears, her sorrow palpable. "I didn't want to disrupt your life, William. I thought you were happy." "You thought wrong," Claire shot back, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "This isn't just about the past anymore. This is about our family, our children." As the atmosphere crackled with unresolved emotions, William closed his eyes, trying to grasp the fragments of his memory. The faces of both women, one representing a past filled with love, and the other a present marred by betrayal, swirled in his mind. "Margaret, please," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me everything." The weight of the moment hung heavy, binding them in a shared history that threatened to unravel everything William had built. And as Claire stood there watching the man she loved grapple with the ghosts of his past, she could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. The empire they had built together now felt precarious, teetering on the edge of a revelation that could change everything. In that charged silence, they all understood that their lives would never be the same again. The room was thick with anticipation, an electric tension hanging in the air as William Hartman, still bleary-eyed and disoriented from his recent awakening, turned his gaze from Margaret to Claire. The medical equipment beeped softly, a constant reminder of the fragility of life, while the gathered family and associates shifted nervously, waiting for the storm to break. I remember," William finally stammered, his voice hoarse and weary. "Margaret, we had something special, didn't we?" His words hung in the air like a fragile crystal, beautiful yet precarious, threatening to shatter at any moment. Margaret's heart raced, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Yes, William, we had a life, a love. But you chose to bury it," she replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging within her. "You thought it was for the best." William swallowed hard, pain etched across his features. "I did what I thought was right. I wanted to protect my family, my empire." He glanced at Claire, whose expression was a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "I never meant to hurt you, Claire. I thought—" "Thought what?" Claire interjected, her voice rising with indignation. "That you could just erase a part of your life, that you could just pretend that it never happened." "Claire, please," William pleaded, desperation seeping into his tone. "I was young and scared. I made choices that I thought would keep you safe. I never wanted to jeopardize what we built together." "Built together?" Claire echoed, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "What about the child, William? The son you never acknowledged? The child you left behind?" The revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud, dark and foreboding. Margaret gasped, her heart racing as she turned to Claire, confusion and fear in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Claire crossed her arms defiantly, her gaze unwavering. "You heard me. The child you had together. The one you never told me about. I knew, Margaret. I've known for years. I just chose to ignore it for the sake of our children." William's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "You knew?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You knew all along and said nothing?" "I didn't want to ruin our family," Claire said, her tone softer now, laden with the weight of years spent in silence. "But now, everything is unraveling, and I can't ignore it anymore. He's been searching for you, William. Searching for his father." "Searching?" William's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of a life he had thought long buried. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Claire shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought you'd never want to see him. After everything, I thought it was best to keep it hidden. But now—" She paused, looking at Margaret, her resolve hardening. "Now, it's time for the truth. He deserves to know who his father is." Margaret stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never wanted this confrontation, never wanted to ignite the anger and betrayal that now crackled in the air. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," she murmured, her voice shaking with emotion. "I just wanted to bring him back into your life, William. I thought you'd want to know." William's eyes widened, realization dawning upon him. "You mean to tell me he's been searching for me all this time?" "Yes," Margaret replied, her voice steady. "He's an adult now, William. He has questions, needs answers. And you can't keep running from this." "Who is he?" William asked, his voice filled with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Just then the door swung open and a tall figure stepped into the room. The light from the hallway cast a halo around him, making him appear almost otherworldly. He was in his late 20s, with a fierce determination in his eyes that mirrored William's own. The resemblance was unmistakable, a haunting echo of the past that sent a shiver down William's spine. "Dad?" The young man's voice rang out, filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. William, Claire, and Margaret all turned to face him, their expressions a blend of shock and disbelief. The air seemed to freeze as the weight of unspoken words and lost years settled heavily over them. "Who are you?" William finally managed to ask, his heart racing. "I'm Alex," the young man replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. "I'm your son." The word hung in the air like a loaded gun, ready to fire. William's breath caught in his throat, and he felt the ground shift beneath him. "My son?" he repeated, disbelief etched across his features. How is that possible?" Claire took a step back, her expression a mixture of shock and sorrow. "This is the child, William, the child you left behind," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Alex took another step forward, his gaze unwavering. "I've been searching for you for years. I need to know who you are, why you never came for me." His voice cracked slightly, revealing the pain he had carried for so long. William felt the walls closing in around him, his mind racing with the implications of this revelation. "I didn't know," he said, his voice trembling. I thought it was over. I never knew you existed." "Then why didn't you ever come back for me?" Alex pressed, the intensity of his gaze piercing through the haze of confusion surrounding William. "I was a coward," William admitted, his voice choking on the truth. "I was scared of what it would mean for my life, for my family. I thought I was protecting everyone by staying away." "Protecting?" Alex scoffed, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You abandoned me. You left me to figure it all out on my own." Margaret stepped forward, her heart aching for both men. "Alex, I tried to tell him, but—" She faltered, glancing at William. "It was never my place to reveal this. I thought he would want to know, but it's clear that the past is more complicated than I ever realized." William's heart sank as he listened to the pain in Alex's voice. He had built his life on the foundation of lies and omissions, and now the truth was crashing down around him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I wish I could change it all." "Sorry isn't enough," Alex replied, frustration and sorrow mingling in his tone. "You can't just wipe away the years you missed. You can't just pretend you didn't have a son." The tension in the room surged, a palpable force that threatened to engulf them all. Claire stood to the side, her heart breaking for both men as they grappled with the weight of their shared history. She had kept the secret for so long, but now it felt as if the truth was bursting forth like a dam that had finally broken. "William," she said, her voice steady, yet filled with compassion. "You need to face this. You need to take responsibility for your past, for Alex. You owe him that much." William nodded slowly, his eyes filled with regret and determination. "You're right, Claire. I can't run anymore. Alex, I want to get to know you. I want to make this right, if you'll let me." Alex's expression softened slightly, the anger giving way to a flicker of hope. "I don't know if I can trust you, but I'm willing to hear you out. Just know that it won't be easy." As the tension in the room began to dissipate, William took a step closer to Alex, his heart pounding with the weight of his choices. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust, to be the father you deserve. This is just the beginning," he vowed, the sincerity in his voice cutting through the uncertainty that had lingered for too long. In that moment, a fragile bridge began to form between the past and the future, a chance for reconciliation amid the chaos of revelations. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, William felt a glimmer of hope. He had the chance to reclaim what he had lost, to embrace a new beginning with the son he never knew he needed,